Hey, welcome back once again. Returning to have another little installment in these ad hoc videos I'm putting together about how to get yourself to a point where you can make sensible plays in Exceed. This is the third video I've recorded. The first was on breakpoints, and we discussed a little bit about um, how to build attacks that overturn strike interactions by way of overcoming common guard values in Exceed. And we used the Soul versus Kai matchup from the Kai perspective to start using that concept to try to begin to tease out the beginnings of a strategy. In the second part, we talked about the speed curve and the speed triangle, ways to do the same thing using speed to overcome common strike interactions, and returned to that Soul versus Kai matchup to continue our dissection of what's going on here in a semi-practical way. At the end of that conversation, we had a couple of hanging questions, and we had a big glut of heuristics that we had kind of established, and we also had kind of a teaser. So I would say the heuristics first. This is where we've kind of landed so far. This is just like, if you don't take anything else away from these lessons, these are good, just useful, probably do them until you have a reason not to. Principles that we've derived from the things that we've talked about so far. Things like use your pokes at their max range because that's when they're on curve. Save your above curve options for defense. Put power on fast things or consistent things. Put speed on mid speeds, things like that. At the very end of the conversation, we had a kind of a teaser about, well, now I can combine these two ideas, speed curves and speed triangles and breakpoints, to build an absolutely unstoppable attack. And the example that we used was Kai at range 3, boosting Vapor Thrust canceled into boosting Be Just or Be Dead, canceled into throwing Dust. This is a combination. This is +2 speed dust, meaning it's a 5 speed dust. It's on curve at range 3. That's where I am. I hit at the speed curve. I stun anything slower than it, and there's nothing faster than it at this range. Except then, in our example, Soul played Cross, and I didn't even mouse over Cross. I apologize for that. We're going to be spending a lot of time in this lesson talking about Cross, and used the After Retreat 3, even though Cross didn't hit, to deny me a whole bunch of value using just one card. And so the first lesson, or the first conversation that we went over, kind of themed itself around sweep and what to do with that problem card. We're going to use Cross, another sort of common problem card, to talk about the positional game of Exceed a little bit, and the fact that the Exceed board has corners and is a physical space that characters are moving around in. Before we get to that, though, I wanted to return to something else that we talked about briefly last time, which was using just the speed curve and an understanding of the way that attacks kind of interact with one another. I can start evaluating character kits as a sort of without really knowing anything about what they're supposed to do. I can look at their cards and start to intuit things about their strategies or their game plans, or at least about what their cards are supposed to do and what they're supposed to be used for. So I like to, before I kind of dive into like big strategic talk, to kind of warm up my brain by doing that. So I have a couple of characters down here that I'm going to sort of lightning round through. I've got Mei and I've got Jin. All I'm going to do is just do a super quick glance at their cards, try to intuit whether they're a fast, a mid speed, or a fast, a mid speed, or a slow, and figure out if I'm right. And then anything that seems confusing, maybe we table for later and we come back to. Jin first seems pretty easy. So we've got a range 2 7-speed option. If we remember from last time, this is a DP, Dragon Punch. This is above curve at 2, so it's definitely a fast. It's even faster than a fast, in fact. Put that in the fast area, I guess. Let's see, 1 to 2 and 4. Well, that's definitely not fast. There's no guard on it, so it's probably not slow either. It must be a mid-speed then. Let me look at the, yep, hit +2. +2 power. If I have more cards in hand than the opponent, I can use my basic math skills to combine 2 and 5 to get 7. I remember from our first conversation that 7 is an important breakpoint and exceed. 7 is enough to stun sweep. That's a big enough deal that I kind of want to earmark this card as being an important thing that Jin can do. I just have 7 printed on a special with no setup. And maybe that means that Jin wants to have a lot of cards in his hand. Could be. All right, so we've got Ice Blade, 3 and 5 range, 3-speed 5 range. This is something that we also might remember from last time, that the speed curve kind of breaks down a little bit at ranges 5 or greater. So we're talking a little bit about like projectiles at this point. Definitely not a fast. Looks kind of like a counterattack, right? It's got 5 guard. Looks kind of like a mid-speed. It doesn't seem like it really beats slows. So this is an interesting one. Maybe we can put this one aside for later, but it seems like maybe we're starting to intuit that if there's big enough range bands on cards, they might do something other than just play with the speed triangle. Crystal Strike. This is a range 4 card that is above curve. This is clearly a fast. There's no guard on it. It wouldn't do anything to any slows anyway. We can put this here. And Dual Ice Strike. This is 1 to 2 with 3 armor, 3 guard. Those really sound like slow stats to me. They're not really, this card doesn't look like it's particularly good at dealing with slows itself, so it's probably not a mid-speed, although looking at it, it seems like 3 is kind of a mid-speedy, it's the same speed as Spike, for example, Dust. Let's think a little bit more about this card. So, having a lot of armor on it means that it's probably going to at least survive a fast attack very easily, but the 2 common fast attack shapes that every character has, one of them would be able to move it far enough away that Dual Ice Strike wouldn't be able to hit back. Another would move itself out of the way far enough that Dual Ice Strike wouldn't be able to hit back. So this doesn't seem to actually function as a slow, despite its guard line, effective guard line. Meanwhile, it actually, at range 2 specifically, it has that same push 2 effect that we remember from Dire Clay. So this actually seems like it has a little bit more in common with this as a mid-speed with an uncommon amount of guard value, and maybe commensurately lower reward. I'm dealing 3 damage instead of 5, for example, to compensate for that. And actually, in reality, as a sort of peek behind the curtain, I'm not quite as new as I'm describing myself being here. Dual Ice Strike is basically another copy of Block in Jin's kit. Like, it's really just used to not take very much damage. But in this context, looking at the cards that actually would deal with it versus the cards that it would do okay against, this is functionally just kind of a weird looking mid-speed. Looking over at his, so we've got, looks like mid-speed, fast. Looking over at his projectiles, this also looks like something, again, clearly we're outside the realm of the speed curve because we're starting at range 4 and going to range 7. So we're not really sure what to do with this kind of card yet. Meanwhile, Moonsong, well, that's above curve at range 3, hits real hard, not hard enough to break sweep on its own. So this is actually just a really, really strong fast poke. So we got that. So it looks to me, and in my naive estimation of what Jin is doing, that I've got 2 mid-speed looking things and 3-ish fast looking things, and then 2 things that I don't really know what to do with yet. And then this thing, which is an astral, which is something that he won't always have access to because of the nuances of BlazBlue's season mechanics. Well, that's X is the number of cards in your hand. That could be a lot. This is pretty clearly a slow, a really big, punishing, crazy slow. So maybe he does have at least one slow option. So we can say maybe this is the slow column, this is the fast column, here's the mid-speed column. Let's do May really quick, too. Same thing. 2 and 6 for my speed and guard values. Certainly not going to be a fast anytime soon. This looks a lot like a slow to me. In fact, it looks almost identical to sweep. So maybe we can put that over here right now. Overhead Kiss, I think I even used this as an example last time. This is a classic mid-speed. It's got ignore armor, ignore guard. It's way below curve. It has no guard of its own. This is definitely in our mid-speed category. Mr. Dolphin. Okay, this is interesting. So we've got a range 1 to 4 card with 4 speed on it. So this is a poke, right? It's a fast thing. It's on curve at 4. But also, it closer up deals more damage when it would be below curve. So that's interesting. Maybe we can think a little bit more about what that might mean in just a second here. But this seems right now that it's a fast, right? We've got Sparkle, which is so again, this could be, around kind of a poke area, but also it's got quite a bit of armor and guard on it. This is reminding me, just looking at its stat line, that it kind of looks a little bit similar to Foudra Arc, where it looks like kind of just like a consistent low reward button that is just kind of a useful glue in the kit. But I guess technically we would probably call this in the fast column as well. And we have Totsugeki, which is above curve at range 4. This looks a lot like a better version of Crystal Strike, so this is also pretty clearly a fast. We've got, this is, if the opponent initiated +3 speed, well, that means it is an 8 speed range 2 attack. That's a DP for sure. That's immensely above curve. And then we've got our stun immune, 1 speed. Absolutely no way this is going fast enough to poke anything out. It doesn't seem like it has any mid-speed properties. So this would go in the slow column. Okay, cool. So let's return really briefly to Mr. Dolphin here, where we had some questions about what the point of this before effect is if you close fewer than 2 spaces +2 power. If you remember from the breakpoints episode, 2 power is not an incredibly relevant amount of stats to give a card, especially not to give one with 4 power, because even if you did that, it would still trade, not beat cleanly sweep. So we can, one reading of this card, having not looked at anything else, is that it seems like it would look a little bit like Dive, where Dive, when used at range 4, is a poke that would be on curve but would lose to sweep. Mr. Dolphin seems to do the exact same thing. Dive has a property where if you use it at range 3, you are no longer on curve, but you jump over the opponent's head and they can't hit you back. Mr. Dolphin seems to have similar interactions, except, that's interesting. Even when it does that, it doesn't beat sweep. So what's going on here? Well, we should probably keep in mind another thing that we learned from last time when we were looking at Soul's kit, to evaluate these in the context of the character that whose kit they're a part of. We can grab May really quick here, because May, like Soul, has a lot of bonus power. When you initiate a strike, you may spend 1 force if you do +1 power. Similarly, on the back, it's just +2 power. So we can say on our turn that all of these cards probably have more power than normal, right? So this is actually might be a 7 or an 8. I remember from the breakpoints episode that 7 or 8 is a mid-speed number. It's a breakpoint number. So this is breaking at ranges at range 2. This would break sweep or even focus, which is, wow, let me earmark that. That seems really important that May can do that. This is already a mid speed. It's not going to get any more mid speed by adding bonus power to it. This is now hitting for 6, which actually makes it look a little bit like Moonsong here, where it's not quite, it's above curve, but it's not quite strong enough to break sweep on its own. But Moonsong is an ultra. This is seems like a pretty strong card if it's hitting for 6 above curve. Sparkle's hitting for 5, 4 or 5. Again, that seems like it just kind of adds to its consistency. Anchor Swing is now hitting for 6 or maybe 7 in Exceed mode. I know that 7 is a big breakpoint number, but I've already kind of put this in the slow column, so what's going on here? Well, I only get my bonus power when I initiate with May, right? So if I ran into my opponent's sweep with an Exceed mode boosted power Anchor Swing, I win the speed tie. So even though this really, really looks like it's sweep, which we know is a slow card, when it has a little bit of extra power on it, it seems to have mid-speed properties too. So maybe I'll keep that in mind for later, that even a 2-speed 6-guard card that looks for all the world like a slow, if it beats other slows, well, hang on, that might actually have a little bit of mid-speed energy too. So, all right, now we have maybe a slightly better picture of what May wants to do, and what it looks like what May wants to do is exceed and then absolutely run you over with a whole lot of power. And anybody who has played against a decent May player knows that that's exactly what she does want to do. So yeah, this is, again, I think of this as just like a fun warm-up to do. And I want to underline again that this is stuff that we can derive about a character basically just from those first 2 conversations that we have. And we can do that for almost every character in the game. It just occurred to me that I wanted to keep one of Jin's cards out. Because there is one other element here that we haven't really been able to find an answer for. And it's something that came up in the last episode as well about Foudra Arc, and really Stun Edge too. I should have mentioned both, but we talked about it with Foudra Arc, is that it had a special property of being able to catch cross, and to bring it back for people who haven't actually seen that. What would happen if you played Foudra Arc at range 4, for example, is it looks a lot like Dive. It's a 4-speed range 4 button. It's actually range 5. That's okay. 2, 3, you hit for an amount of damage, you're on curve, all that stuff. If you use it closer up, here, for example, and my opponent uses cross, 1, 2, 3 to get away, well, Foudra Arc has enough guard on it and enough movement on it to chase down cross and hit it anyway. And that's what being a cross catcher is about. The reason that we're talking about this separately in this lesson is that property is a very important thing for characters to be able to do, and if they can or can't do it might inform a fair amount about what their game plan should be. The reason for that is that, similar to Sweep, Tross is like a kind of like a game-defining card in Exceed. And the reason for it becomes obvious pretty quickly when you look at it, and I apologize again for neglecting to look at it in more detail a little while ago. So we have this idea from previous episodes. I seem to have lost Dive. We have from previous episodes this idea of what card shapes are. We have our fasts, our mid speeds, our slows, right? These 3 rather are pretty clearly slows. These 2 are mid speeds. This is also sometimes a fast. And then these 3 are fasts for sure, because they can be on curve and they're not going to be any slows anytime soon. Except Cross, if we look at it, doesn't actually seem to lose to anything, does it? In a way that, when I was using sort of the classic example of a fast versus slow interaction, I pulled out this card, push or pull 1 or 2 versus sweep. If I'm at range 1 and Soul grasps me and I go to range 3, my sweep still hits and I still trade up. That is a very the thing that we would expect to happen when a fast runs into a slow. When the exact same thing happens cross into sweep, let's say that Soul sweeps me and I use cross, or I initiate with cross and Soul responds with sweep. I back up 3 and I reach range 5 and sweep misses. Even though this is a fast card, it seems to have beaten cleanly this slow card. And it also beat cleanly. It would have beaten this card cleanly. It would have beaten this card cleanly. Grasp doesn't hit at range 2. It would have beaten this cleanly. It would have beaten this cleanly. Block can't really beat anything. So it seems like Cross doesn't lose to anything. And normally at this point in the conversation, I would probably reveal, actually, that's not true, because here's all of the sort of nuances to Exceed's engine that I haven't revealed yet that would mean that Cross actually has plenty of loss cases. No, actually, Cross just doesn't lose very often. This is one of the reasons that we have cards like this over here. I should look actually at what Ice Blade or Stun Edge does at range 2 when it runs into a Cross. Let's say, again, here we have Kai throwing this card, or if he had a copy of it somehow, this card, into Soul's Cross. Well, Soul backs up to 5. These all would guard through and either snipe Cross out of the air or chase it down and deal damage anyway. The reason that these cards are relevant is because they're one of very few things that actually do meaningfully deal with Cross. So Cross is, I think, to a lot of people, busted with a kind of a caveat to it. There was a poll on Breakfast Club a while ago about what the strongest normal is, and I think that the opinion was split pretty firmly. I can't actually remember the result, but the opinion was split pretty firmly between the obviously really, really, really strong slows that we devoted almost an hour of our time to talking about what to do about, and Cross. Cross doesn't hit very hard. It probably does hit. It deals with pretty much everything, right? And one reason that for example, a DP is such a valuable tool to be able to represent is that having something above curve at range 2 actually gives your character something that can meaningfully deal with Cross. So Cross, in terms of just its attack interactions, seems stupid. It seems game warping, in fact. In reality, Cross is a really good way to reveal something very important about Exceed, which is that it takes place on a board. And the exact same interactions that allow Cross to beat everything in the game, pretty much, caveats, DPs, cross catchers, all the normals in the game, when used when you have space to retreat, suddenly it becomes nearly useless when you are in the corner. This is, I think, this is one of, honestly, earlier I said, it's sort of like a backbone of Exceed that Assault plus Fierce doesn't break sweep. Another backbone of Exceed is that Cross doesn't work when you're cornered. This is one of the things that makes the game fun. So despite the fact that Cross is this overwhelmingly powerful option, it illuminates all of the positional play that makes Exceed fun. Because now we can think about, well, I have to muscle my opponent into the corner so that I can hit with my wild throw, for example. Something that it's already a mid speed. It's already quite risky. I have that you cannot be pushed or pulled effect on it, which means that it actually would deal quite well with Grasp, but it would lose pretty hard to Cross, right? Because Cross would just leave. So, I mean, I can look at this card alone and what would happen if I put a cancelable power boost with Soul's character ability on it and hit for 8 ignore armor and gain advantage. I want that very badly, right? So maybe I can just intuit from this card and Soul's character ability and the existence of Cross as a card that what Soul wants is to corner the opponent, because that would shut off uh, a primary way to deal with this incredibly scary card. I could then, if I wanted to, look through and see if I had any other reasons to think that Soul wanted to corner the opponent. I can see that I have quite a few push effects and quite a few close effects that I could use to chase down an opponent. I have another card here that would get much more consistent if the opponent was cornered. They would lose its blind spot at range 1 if I couldn't advance past the opponent. I have another push effect over here. I have another close effect over here. It seems like, just looking at the shape of Soul's kit here, that cornering the opponent is a great idea. This is, again, sort of foundational to what Exceed is about. We can see a similar dynamic, although maybe a little bit less terrifying, in Kai's kit, where Foudra Arc is a range 2 to 5 card. If the opponent's cornered, it really becomes a range 1 to 5 card because it can't move over the opponent and miss. Spike, similarly, becomes a much more threatening button if the opponent can't cross out. So Cross, as it exists, really highlights the corners and their importance in Exceed. And something that you can do when you're evaluating characters is kind of find, like, what do I have that can deal with Cross? What can I do about Cross? So we saw Kai has a couple options here. He's got Stun Edge, he's got Foudra Arc. Those both seem to work quite well. I know that I have an above curve, very above curve Ultra that would stun out Cross. I know that I have a range 1 to 5 button that would catch a Cross. I know I have a DP. I actually have a remarkable number of ways to deal with Cross. So we saw that Kai was really struggling a little bit when we were putting him up against really consistent guardy cards like Night Raid Vortex or Sweep, that he was having a little bit of trouble on that axis. Comparatively, it's a breeze for him to deal with Cross. He has many options that can handle that. That might disincentivize the opponent from crossing out at all. Meanwhile, Soul definitely has options as well. We've got his own DP. We've got Night Raid Vortex, which can definitely, at range 1 at least, can definitely chase down a Cross. Even if it's at range 2, it can at least make up some space and keep him in the fight. That's kind of it, right? I mean, he's got Bandit Bringer, which would do a similar thing. It would make up some distance, but he clearly can't handle Crosses the way that Kai can. The other thing that mitigates Cross as a card is that most characters in the game would really prefer to fight in melee. Soul certainly would. His whole deal is that he's chasing you down. Even Kai, who has definitely some, like, zoner properties, right? He's got big hitboxes. He's got a couple of projectiles and jump-in moves and things like that. Some of his haymakers, or insofar as Kai has haymakers, this is a range 1 to 2 card, for example. We've got a DP that really functions quite well at specifically range 2. He's got several range 4 buttons that we should also, give credit to. He's got all of these do fairly well at range 4. But even he, like all of his normals, for example, half his deck, with nothing that he has on the board right here goes beyond range 4. Every character is like that. So another thing that kind of mitigates Cross's dominance is by using it, you are moving yourself toward the corner, giving your opponent, or actually, you're either moving yourself toward the corner or you're letting your opponent out of the corner. If you're in like this position and I cross out to here, now I've given Soul a little bit more space to breathe. But in many situations where you might use cross, I've pushed myself toward the corner by using it. Right, giving my opponent a lot of room. If they can chase me down, I'm suddenly in a very bad position if I wind up in like here, right? So that's a mitigating factor on cross, that I will corner myself. I will wind up in a situation where half my deck just about no longer really functions. And in Soul's case, honestly, like basically all of his deck low-key stops functioning. He basically has Night Raid Vortex, and if he really wants to spend on it, he'd have Heavy Mob. But almost everything else, here's a range 3, here's a range 2, here's a range 3. Like he really can't fight that far out. And to make matters worse, basically with the exception of the Undernight season, no matter what boost you have on cross, it's something that you could conceivably use to make up some distance. This is most pronounced in earlier seasons of the game, where let's just grab Ryu really quick. The cross's boost is run, which is right here. Advance up to 3. So you have a button that moves you out, and the same boost that's on it. You have an attack that moves you out, and by using that attack, you are depriving yourself of one of your primary ways to move back in. So you'd better have another way to get out after you dodged something with a cross. This is a little bit less pronounced in the Guilty Gear season, for example, because we have dash, which advances 3 on slash. Area shift is more of a positional tool used to corner the opponent sometimes, or to get some free gauge. It's much less of an impediment to getting yourself back in after you've crossed out. We also talked last time about, so anyway, those are all of the sort of mitigating factors on cross, that it will deposition you, it will make it harder to get back in, your stuff kind of stops working when you're that far out. So all of those mitigating factors mean that you sort of need to use your crosses when it's important to dodge an attack. The example that we gave last time was when Kai was at range 3, thought he had an absolutely, flawless kill shot in his range 3 on-curve spike, and Soul, we call this empty crossing, where cross didn't even hit, and it didn't even have to hit to deny him, 2 boosts, 2 gauge, and a strike's worth of value. All Soul lost was this cross. Soul might feel kind of bad about having to now make up a few spaces of movement, but I guarantee you that Kai felt worse, right? That interaction does not happen at all. It's a completely free win for Kai if he does the exact same thing right here. Just a couple spaces of movement different means that he had a guaranteed kill, or close to it, on Soul. Outside of things like EX attacks, right? So this is the kind of like the animation of the positional game of Exceed. That figuring out what you're going to do about your opponent's crosses, how much can you afford to invest in scary strikes when your opponent has a button that is so good at dodging them that it's so good at dodging them that we print dedicated cards to deal with them, right? So now let's briefly switch things over to Soul's perspective in this Kai versus Soul matchup. And let's say, well, okay, so we've already talked about how Kai really wants to probably hang out at range 2, and maybe he can leverage that dust on Soul. And clearly, Soul wants to corner Kai so that he can get his big, scary, his bandit bringer, his wild throw become much, much stronger. He also has where is it? Oh no, that's a close effect, not a push effect. I'm thinking of something else. But he clearly he has a lot more offense when Kai is cornered. So maybe Kai now wants to leverage Dust to deal with Soul's slow attacks, and wants to kind of hold Cross over his head to back up out of the really scary things that Soul might be doing to him, all while trying to keep himself out of the corner at all costs. Right? From Soul's perspective, what is he trying to do specifically to catch that Cross? Maybe he's going to stick to range 1 and chase it down with Night Raid Vortex. Maybe he's just going to accept that he's got to lose to it occasionally and make up the distance later. Maybe he's going to Tyrant Rave and spend the gauge to try to snipe across. Maybe he's going to parry it out of Kai's hand so that he doesn't have to deal with it at all. But Soul is making similar considerations to what to do about Kai's Cross that we were making in our first episode about what Kai should do about Soul's sweep and Night Raid Vortex, right? This is kind of how matchups develop in Exceed. But really, Soul's plan is to do what Soul always wants to do, which is corner the opponent, right? Because Cross no longer works here, right? No longer works here, certainly. And Soul might have some trial and error about where exactly he wants to stand. An adage, for example, is that grapplers, which Soul sort of want to hug the center of the board, because if they chase you all the way to the corner and Kai gets out somehow and runs away using Cross, which Kai can definitely do. Kai has advance or retreat 1 on his character ability. You get him to here, he says, awesome, cancel, strike, Cross. Now you've got a lot more distance to make up, and he still has more room to run. So maybe Soul has to figure out where exactly in this position he wants to stay when he's setting up his kill shots. But clearly, he wants to diffuse Kai's ability to cross out. In other matchups, that dynamic might not actually really exist for Kai. Kai actually has an odd relationship with the corner himself, where cards like, for example, if he has the opponent cornered, Dire Clay, although it does give him an economic upside, stops beating sweep because it can't push far enough to get it out of the way anymore. Meanwhile, Ride the Lightning, if you are at in this position, Ride the Lightning is incredibly hard to stun. Spike can't hit it because you're at range 1. Really, the only thing that can deal with it meaningfully is if your opponent dives over you, whiffs on purpose, and then you can't hit them back. That doesn't work if Kai is in the corner, because you can't dive over him anymore, and Ride the Lightning is virtually guaranteed. So this relationship with the corner is going to change matchup by matchup. Sometimes it's absolutely paramount to avoid the corner at all costs, the way it might be against Soul. Other times, it's a consideration, right? It's something that you kind of need to do because of how strong Cross is, and you want to be able to use it, but it might not be your whole game plan to avoid the corner. This is something else that is that I wanted to kind of lead into, which is that we talked before about using your pokes at their maximum range so that they can work as intended as fast options, right? They can be on curve. There are many times in Exceed that you would want to kind of deviate away from that game plan. One of them is that often Cross is actually very good at range 1 for a couple of reasons. Number one, you don't go as far out so that you can more easily come back in. More characters have more things to do at range 4 than at range 5. another reason that cross is so enticing at range 1 sometimes is that a lot of really scary cards are at range 1. They are, for example, sweep. We've talked plenty about why sweep is so scary and such a powerful card. Sweep is a little bit awkward to play at range 2 because spike exists. And some players just are very uncomfortable doing that. So if you are using cross to dodge a sweep at range 2, where it's at its best range, against someone who's never going to play the sweep at range 2 anyway, what are you dodging? Likewise, I would really, really love to use my cross to get out of the way of wild throw. And Soul's never going to throw wild throw unless I'm at range 1, because it's a range 1 card. So don't discount the fact that that a card used at a range different from its seemingly optimal range can definitely be very impactful. Similarly, in the example that we just gave with Kai in the corner, the situation here where okay, well, I've got a guaranteed ride the lightning now, right? Pretend I don't have that for a second. This is the a classic situation in which you would use in which Soul would use sweep. My opponent can't cross out anymore. It's a seemingly guaranteed kill shot, just like the guaranteed kill shot with Ride the Lightning. All Kai has to do is use dive to dodge the attack and force a whiff and get out of the corner at the same time. So a classic, a wonderful thing to do in this situation is to throw either grasp, which would just catch the dive clean and keep you in the corner, or even spicier, throw slash, gain advantage, and get higher upside with a little bit of a less of a guarantee that you're going to keep him in the corner. Now he's used up the dive. Now you can sweep him probably for free. So honestly, like the end of this lesson is just remember that the corner exists. Think about using your cards. Make sure that you are thinking about changing the way that you use your cards as you get closer to the corner, or as your relationship, your spatial relationship with your opponent changes, because these cards do different things. We saw with dive that it's a poke at range 4 but a mid speed at range 3. Make sure that you aren't evaluating your cards in a vacuum. The cards and the characters exist on the board, and they need to you need to sort of respect the fact that there are ends to this board. So when we're returning to this character evaluation thing that we keep doing, this exercise we keep doing, the new things that you're adding into this arsenal of things to look for. First, what am I doing about cross? What does my character have that can deal with cross? Second, does anything I have change in effectiveness when I'm in the corner, when my opponent's in the corner, things like that. I wonder if we can find a decent example of a character who we can work with that kind of evaluation. How about, let's look at Faust, for example. This could be kind of cool. So let's see. So we can do the exact same game that we always do. We'll take a quick glance at Faust's character ability to see that he can action compress and have a boost in play when he's striking, but he doesn't know what that boost is going to be. Let's ignore that for now and just look at his card shapes the way that we have been this whole time. So we've got 6 speed, 1 range. That's a mid speed, right? That's a very devastating mid speed that kind of beats everything slower than it. It's slightly below curve, gives your opponent a really nasty boost. That's a mid speed for sure. At range 1, this could catch cross, definitely. This is a range 1 to 8 with a boost in play. This is very slow, but quite strong. We should probably think of this in a similar way to how we were thinking about Jin's Ice Fang Ultra. That it seems to be doing something other than just playing in normals range. This is like basically a big dive or a big projectile. So let's put that aside. We've got Love, which is an on curve range 4 option. So this looks like a fast to me. We've got Thrust, which it looks like a big rangy mid speed. It definitely hits for 7, which is enough to stun sweep in certain positions. That really looks like a mid speed. And I'm noticing here, pull 2. Yeah, let's put this on the board really quick so we can illustrate what's happening. If I'm playing against Kai with Thrust, and I'm here, for example, Thrust pulls 2, the opponent is now at range 1, I hit for 7 and push 2, awesome. If I'm here, I pull 2 and only hit for 4. So this card seems to be stronger at ranges 2 and 3. When Faust is in the corner, I can pull from any of these positions and still hit for 7. So this is a card that seems to interact with the corner by getting stronger when Faust is cornered. We've got, what else do we have? So yeah, let's put this back in our mid speed column though for now. We've got Mix, which seems to be this looks pretty slow. It's 2 speed. It's range 1 to 4. It's got an after effect on it to dodge stuff. It might be kind of hard to use to dodge stuff. However, we've seen before that sometimes even a 2-speed card could have some mid-speed properties. And I'm seeing this 5 guard here, and I'm thinking that if I use this as a counterattack when my opponent initiates, and it ran into sweep, I'd probably just explode, because sweep would beat it cleanly. Meanwhile, if I throw it myself and my opponent responds with sweep, I might be able to get away in some situations, even if I don't hit myself. So this actually looks like a pretty consistent mid speed rather than a slow. We can maybe kind of put it here for now. We've got a super above curve projectile with a lot of randomness to it. That feels like a fast to me. We've got attacks with higher speed do not hit you. Well, that seems like a slow. And we've got before advance 3 on it. So this, if you're very, very daring, you could use this to catch cross at range 1 in particular. Maybe they initiate with cross trying to bait out snip, for example, and you use it to get away. To answer our question before about what happens when you use it, what changes in your kit when you're in the corner. Well, now this doesn't have a range shadow anymore. You can use it at range 1, you can use it at range 2, you can use it pretty much wherever you want. And you might land it for quite a bit of free damage. It's a little bit harder to land than it looks. But okay, so we have a card that seems to get more consistent in the corner. We have a card that seems to get stronger when we're in the corner. So those are 2 things to keep in mind for Faust. We have what do we have that can deal with cross? We have, this seems like a really scary call out button. We have Mix, which could, in some situations, chase down cross. At least it would make up distance on it. We have something that is big enough to catch cross, even if it won't hit for a ton of damage. We have something that if I initiate with it can really badly punish cross. We have a super above curve projectile that could punish cross. If my opponent already crossed out, I can use it probably for free. If I use it to catch their cross, they're probably just very sad. And we even have something that if my opponent has managed to make all the space in the world, I can actually probably punish them for it. So Faust has lots of ways to deal with cross, way, way more than Soul, right? He seems to be able to control range enough that crossing out against him is really not a problem at all. I'll keep that in mind when I'm dealing with Faust. If I'm playing as Kai, that's gonna impact my decision making much differently than it would if I played it against Soul. So yeah, that's kind of all I wanted to mention today. That Cross is really good, and not only is it really good, it's kind of foundational to the game, and the way that you handle it illustrates a lot about the way you play Exceed. So I hope this was enjoyable. I hope that people learned something, or at least had some fun listening to me ramble for a while. I think I have like one more of these planned, and then I feel like I've probably said all that I have to say. Yeah, hopefully I'll see you all for the next one. Goodbye, everybody.